Hello, everyone. Welcome to my live weekly Q&A. My name is Danny Segura, and yeah, welcome to my Q&A. There's a lot to talk about this week. A lot to talk about this week. We just had UFC DC last night, as well as Anthony Joshua versus Andy Ruiz. Tito Ortiz fought Alberto Del Rio. If you guys didn't see that, Korean Zombie is now fighting Frankie Edgar somehow. Why? I don't know. UFC 245 is also coming up next week. So a bunch to talk about here. So if you're fairly new to my live Q&A, this is the way it works. So basically, I've asked you guys to submit some questions on Twitter to queue those up. So I have some questions queued up and I will be tackling those first. And then after, I'll be going to the live chat and tackling those. So if you didn't get to ask anything on Twitter, you can go on the live chat and just throw whatever you want. And I'll get to it in the later part of this video. But first things first is Twitter. So let's do it. Let's get right into it. We got a decent amount today. I think we had more questions last week, but oddly enough, and it was a slow week as far as action goes, because there was a lot of news that happened, obviously, with the Conor booking, Habib, Tony Ferguson, and a few other things as well. But man, this was a very busy week. It was like kind of low key because there wasn't, besides the Joshua and Ruiz fight, there wasn't like any major event, but I think there is still a lot to talk about. As Alec Cartier mentioned here, rest in peace, Struve's nuts. Yes, rest in peace indeed. That man took some hard shots to the nuts, and that didn't end too well. So I'm sure I'll get to that in the video. I believe somebody asked about it on Twitter. Let me see. By the way, if you hear, yeah, somebody asked about it on Twitter. So yeah, I'll get to that. I have some thoughts on that. Yeah, and just quick disclaimer: if you hear crazy noises, that's just the nature of the beast here in Brooklyn. So you know, no way to go around that. So I'm gonna pop out the chat over here so I can have it on the screen pulled up. And yeah, let's get started. So let's get into it. Hopefully you guys had a good week. I did. Brooklyn weather still shitty. New York weather still shitty, but got my coffee, so we're good to go. All right. Well, let's get right into it because I kind of teased it a little bit, and I want to this. Am I going to talk about Atletico Madrid? Maybe. Going through some tough times, boys. Anyways, let's get right into Stefan Struve's nuts, I guess, and the shots. So Pat the D asks, your opinion on the Struve versus Rothwell fight. I think at the beginning it was one of the best Struves I've seen in a long time. But in focus and the momentum change after the first low blow and after the second, man, it was a done deal. So a lot to talk about here, and thanks for asking that, Pat the D. And I'm also gonna throw some stuff in here that you did not mention regarding referee Dan Mirgliotta, because he had some involvement in this, which made the whole result a little interesting. So here's basically what happened in case you missed last night's fights. So more or less, Stefan Struve came out of retirement. I had spoken to him back when I was at MMA Fighting on the reasons why he came out of retirement. A lot of it was he was just saying he was basically burnt out at the time. And I feel like it's something we see a lot with fighters these days. Like they retire. I mean, I just spoke to Neymar Court for MMA Junkie, like last week? He's coming out of retirement. He announced that with me. So it's definitely like a common thing where fighters get to a point that they're so fed up with the training, because the training's not easy. It's tough. Just the politics of the game, the fight game itself is hard life. And they just get burnt out. And then they walk away from the sport and they realize they still got some gas left in their tank and they want to continue competing. So they come back. So, some more than others, obviously, but basically that's what happened here. So a lot of people were concerned about Struve coming back because, the old saying of, look, this is not an easy sport. You got to be in it 100%. So if you're going to come back, like if you're going to fight, you should be in it. You shouldn't be dabbling between retirement and your fight life. So a lot of people I think, had poor expectations from Stefan Struve. I necessarily didn't. He left, I believe, on a win on his last fight. And I believe he was like on a 2-fight win streak when he left. Let me double check. So he didn't leave like getting knocked out a bunch of times. Oh no, he no, yeah, he left on one win, and then before that he had three consecutive losses. So yeah, not great, but anyways, yes, I agree with Pat the D here. He went in there against Rothwell. I think that's the best Stefan Struve I've seen in a while. He's obviously had very good performances. If you guys don't remember, he had a stretch before the loss to Mark Hunt back in like 2011, 2012. I think that's the best run he's had in his career, where he submitted Pat Barry, then TKO'd Dave Herman, then defeated LeVar Johnson via armbar. That's when he beat Stipe Miocic right after. And, Miocic wasn't champion then, but nonetheless, that was a big win. And he was just looking really good. I think that's the best. Last night was the best I've ever seen Stefan Struve look since that era. So we're talking about 2012 here. That's when he beat Stipe Miocic, right? He had some other good wins here and there, but one of the biggest critiques of his career was that he never, not that he never, but his reach was not utilized often. It wasn't utilized very well. So he's this very long fighter, this very rangy guy, but he tends to get into wars in close quarter combat, and it usually didn't turn out too well for him. And people wanted to see him use the jab, and I think we saw that. It wasn't perfect, but we did see him stick to his jab, use kicks, use his range, straightforward punches, and he was tagging up Rothwell, who's a very good fighter and a very tough guy. Then along the line, he gets hit on the nuts, goes down clearly in pain. It was clear that it was a clean shot, right? There was no question about that. He gets 5 minutes to continue. He complains. He's a little upset. Comes back, still looking good. I believe that was in round one. Then in round two, again, looking good, looking sharp, landing good shots, avoiding big shots from Rothwell, keeping him at bay. And then he gets hit on the nuts again, goes down. And this is where it gets interesting. Then Dan Miragliotta goes to him, grabs sort of his mic in an attempt to cover it up. But although it was a bit muffled, we still could hear what he was saying. So that was interesting. And he basically tells him, hey, look, I know you got hit pretty hard. We're going to take a point away from this guy. If you do decide not to continue fighting, this fight will be a no contest. And, just letting you know, I feel like you're up 2 rounds. So he says that. Immediately, the commentators, DC, Paul Felder, and John Anik were all wondering, like, wait, is that even legal? Can you do that? And I'm not really sure if that's legal, but I think ethically is not even right. I'm not saying Dan gave him bad advice. I think that was accurate what he was saying. It's like, yeah, it hurt you. If you're good to continue, you should continue. The fight's going to be a no contest. And just letting you know, it looks like you're up by 2 rounds. I mean, I thought he was up by 2 rounds. So yeah, it wasn't the worst thing to continue, but before he continues the fight, before they go, all right, fight, Stefan Struve is like slouching down and like, putting his hands on his knees. And I go, wait a minute, you're not good to fight. That's my immediate thought. And I tweeted something about it and saying basically like, yeah, I don't think Struve is good. I don't know if this is a good idea to continue. You fast forward a few seconds later, Rothwell comes like a bat out of hell, puts the pressure on Struve, knowing he's a point down, knowing he has to finish this fight. And basically, rocks Struve. Struve shows up, and that was the fight. So, what I think here, I think a few things. I think people are a little more upset than they should be. For starters, of course, I mean, we saw the guy who got low blowed twice eventually lose. So there feels like there wasn't some justice there. So I feel like a lot of people are upset because of that. But at the end of the day, Struve said he was good. He could have had the chance to not fight, right? He could have just been like, look, I can't continue, and then it's a no contest. I think where this gets weird is the referee. The referee is only there to make sure that the laws and rules are being abided by, are being followed. That's it. I mean, he has some influence in the bout because that's just the nature of our sport where, if there is an action, then you got to stand them up and this and that. Although, if there is an action on the feet, you don't go, all right, now get down to the ground. Again, those are just the rules of our sport. But outside of that itself, the referee usually has no influence on or no advice. He's just there as a neutral figure to make sure that everything is up to code. That's the referee's position, really. And what he did here was basically advise Struve. And I don't know. I'm going to reach out to Struve and talk to him about that. But it was just interesting because I wonder how much did that influence his decision to continue fighting, because he clearly did not look okay. But if someone's telling you like, look, you're up 2 rounds, I mean, basically reassuring you that, look, you're pretty close to the win here, and if you decide to call it quits, it's going to be a no contest. I think that should be secondary. The first question shouldn't be, am I up? What will this result be? The first question is, are you okay? Because if you're not okay, you shouldn't be competing, period. And he clearly wasn't. So it was very controversial. To be honest, I don't know if people are claiming for Struve to retire, but I don't want him to retire. I thought he looked good. I thought he looked sharper than ever. I thought, again, like I said, this is the best he's looked, I think, since defeating Miocic, since like 2012. He was using his distance, his jab, his speed. Somebody here, Almighty Can, is saying Struve is not athletic enough for his size, make him very slow and clumsy. Yeah, I mean, that's what happens when you're like 8 feet tall. Like, the guy's not one of the smaller, quicker guys at heavyweight, but that doesn't mean you can't use your range and your distance. And he was. I think it's a learn, it's a process. So maybe in a few fights we'll see him get even better at it. But what's most important here is that there was improvement. So if he just comes back and is the same guy, then you go, okay, well, what are you doing here? The whole purpose of this thing is to get better and to improve, and he clearly has done that. So hopefully he comes back and whenever he's ready to fight, then he gets a good opponent. But I did think that was definitely controversial and a little bit of BS. I don't think Struve should have continued on fighting. I just don't. I mean, I tweeted it out as soon as I saw him, when Dan is like trying to size them up, like, all right, you guys ready to fight? Struve is like literally grabbing his knees and like slouching down. Like, that's not good, man. You were hit twice, cleanly, twice, and very hard by a heavyweight. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that. Bad D's. Thanks for asking. That was probably the most controversial thing about this weekend. Outside of that, there wasn't really. Well, there was that one decision between Song Yadong and Cody Stanman. So I think somebody asked about that too. So maybe I'll get to that a little later. But that was probably the most controversial thing this weekend. All right. Michael Terrell on Twitter asks, is it possible the UFC booked Khabib Ferguson in April to give Conor enough time to turn around after January? I don't think so. That could be like a benefit. So let's say like McGregor wins in January and leaves the fight fairly untouched. I'm not even sure if he'd be down to be like a late replacement, but I think that'd be an easy way to him to justify fighting for the title again in case Ferguson or Habib were to drop out, because it's like, all right, look, we made the deserving fight. It's not happening. Either guy, whoever it is, couldn't continue. Conor's ready. I mean, I'm not saying that's the fair thing to do. I think in that case, Justin Gaethje would be the guy you'd call up before McGregor. But we can all agree it probably the most important thing is that they try to make this Ferguson Khabib fight, which they are. But anyways, it could also be, it gives them time for Conor McGregor to show up and watch that fight, create some buzz around it. Just his presence alone would make the event a bit bigger, even if it means he's not next in line still. Just his presence there would make things interesting. I think those are all pluses, but I don't necessarily, for the promotion, but I don't necessarily think that's why they made it. I think McGregor's been itching to return for a while. Remember, he had that hand injury, so a comeback has been in the works. It just so happened to be that they weren't able to make it happen. So this is the closest date they could make it happen. And then you got Khabib, who fought, out of the three guys the most recently, right, at UFC 242. And like, look, they got to fill pay-per-view slots. So, that's how it goes. But I don't think there's some crazy conspiracy. Like, is it possible the UFC booked, Khabib Ferguson to give McGregor enough time to turn around after January? I mean, I'm sure that's something they've realized, but I don't think that was done on purpose. All right. Nino Tini Jr. Or I'm not sure if it's Nino, and then you just couldn't add the Año on the keyboard because you got to press extra keys, and a lot of people don't know about that. But anyways, Nino or Nino asks on Twitter, if Jose Aldo is able to get past Marlon Moraes in impressive fashion, do you think he would be deserving of a title shot? I know this is his first fight at bantamweight, but Marlon is ranked number 1 and is coming off a title shot. What are your thoughts? Okay, so here are my thoughts. First of all, and this is a quick side note, it's BS, and I like Marlon. He's a great guy. And obviously a top contender in that division. But like, you just fought for the title. You shouldn't be the number 1 contender. The number 1 contender should be the dude or the lady in the baddest streak, in the longest streak, beating the toughest names. He's just coming off a loss against the champion. How can you be number 1 contender? That just shows you how like flawed the UFC ranking system is. But anyways, I'm sure I've mentioned that millions of times before in the past, but I had to get that off my chest. Because yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. But anyways, to answer the question, there's a lot of questions here. First of all, I'm very skeptical about Jose Aldo even making that weight. Have you seen the recent pictures that have come out of Jose Aldo's training camp? He looks very pale. That could be just because he's not getting any sun, but he just looks already very drained and very tired and just fatigued. And that's from pictures that people choose to put on Instagram. Imagine maybe the ones that they don't choose. I mean, essentially anything you post on Instagram is the best you've ever, like, you're not going to put a bad picture of yourself, right? I mean, some people do, I guess, but for the most part, you try to put the best thing possible, right? I think that's the common thought. And then you still look like that. I know McGregor has defended him. He came out there on Twitter saying, let me pull the tweet up. He came out there saying like, oh, I think he looks all right for my experience. He's like trimmed down, blah, blah, blah. Let me exactly give you what he said. And then also Darren Till weighed in, which I thought was interesting. So you got two guys that used to cut massive amount of weight and were drawn out by it. And they both weighed in and they both had different opinions. Now, I feel like I may be wrong. Again, this is my opinion, but I feel like a lot of McGregor's thing behind that tweet was out of respect rather than just using, I don't know, or maybe he actually believes it. I don't know, but this is what he posted. So Ariel basically tweeted out a photo with Jose Aldo just looking not good and questioning if bantamweight is a good idea. And then Connor replied, I disagree here. He looks more than on top of it, in my experience opinion. Well trimmed in advance and naturally a lighter man now. That's for sure. This can only be done over a long length of time and with complete dedication. Respect. I wish him well, and I'm excited to see him in this new division. I'm not excited unless he can actually be healthy, but I really have doubts surrounding that. And yes, he looks a lot smaller, but I don't know. He was never a small dude to begin with at featherweight. He had issues making featherweight for a long time. He fixed those. And then I really did think he was just a great fit for featherweight. I don't know how he can make bantamweight. I mean, we saw TJ Dillashaw try to make 125. That didn't go well. I don't know. I think he makes the weight, maybe, but I don't know if this is a sustained run for him. I don't like something like Anthony Pettis when he dropped to 145. You might be able to hit the weight once or twice, but after those 2-3 those initial weight cuts, what repercussions are they going to have on your body, type thing. So for starters, but let's say he makes the weight and he actually fights Marlon, right? And he actually beats him in impressive fashion, like Nino Tini Jr. is suggesting here on Twitter. Should he get the next title shot? Well, that's a tough one. Who do you got as the number 1 contender there right now? Well, besides Marlon, who just fought for the belt. All right, bantamweight. So number 2 is Aljamain Sterling. He's deserving of a title shot. That man needs a title shot. But the problem with him is that he suffered an injury, and I believe he's going to get surgery, or he got surgery pretty soon. I don't know the status on that. So I have a feeling he's going to be out for a bit. Then right below is Corey Sandhagen, who was supposed to fight Frankie Edgar. That could have been a number 1 contender bout, for Edgar or Sandhagen, to be honest. Yeah, and then it's Peter Yan. Peter Yan is fighting Uriah Faber. I guess so. Since that fight is so soon, it wouldn't be out of the ordinary. It all depends on when Henry Cejudo will return. Um, but yeah, I could definitely see him getting a title shot if he were to beat Marlon Moraes, Jose Aldo. Yeah, yep, I can see that, which would be insane. But yeah, when he first initially tweeted like, "Yo, I'm not gonna bend the knee. You're not a king," and stuff like that. Jose Aldo was to Henry Cejudo. I just thought that was really fight promotion. There was no way in hell he was gonna try to make bantamweight. I think even Dana White was like, "Yeah, that's not true." And here he is, cutting to 135 pounds and scheduled to fight a bantamweight. Um, so yeah, yeah, we'll see how that goes. Hopefully, well, man. Hopefully he's healthy. That's all I can wish for. You don't want to see any health complications to anyone, right? I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but um, given what I know and what I've seen in the sport, it's hard to imagine a different scenario. But look, knock on wood, hopefully it all goes well uh, leading up to the fight for Jose Aldo. And then once the fight rolls out, let the best man win. How about that? All right, let's go along here. Pat the D asks again, we got 2 draws yesterday, agree or not? And your opinion on the Stanman versus Yadong fight score. Keep up the good work and can't wait to hear you on the MMA Roadshow with MMA Junkie John. I will like that. One day I'll make my MMA Roadshow debut. But yeah, the draws. So it was interesting. This card had 2 majority draws. One of them being the Marina Rodriguez versus Cynthia Calvillo fight, which was the co-main event. And the other one being the Cody Stanman versus Sang Yadong fight. So for the Calvillo fight, I believe I might have had it 29-28 Marina Rodriguez. I thought she won the first 2 rounds. Clearly, the striking was much better. Rocked Calvillo a few times. I thought Rodriguez's body work in the second round was just ridiculous. And Calvillo's tough as hell, and you can tell she was like real hurt by it. So I was super impressed with Rodriguez. Also, Rodriguez was fighting Calvillo, who missed weight and came in significantly heavier. I believe almost about 5 pounds heavier. She came in at 120.5 for a strawweight bout. So, and then Cynthia Calvillo got a takedown in the third and dominated the action. A lot of people thought that could have been a 10-8 round for Calvillo, which I think it's not crazy. But I'm a little hesitant because Rodriguez also, rocked Calvillo in basically the first 2 rounds. And, that was a 10-8 in my mind. I mean, a 10-9, sorry. So I did not score the last round 10-8 for Calvillo. But if you did, I don't think it's the craziest thing in the world. Again, I don't think it's super controversial, but I did think Marina Rodriguez did enough to win. Now in the Cody Stainman versus Sang Yadong bout, I'll be honest, I missed a good chunk of it because I was doing a write-up for MMA Junkie because I was working last night. But from what I remember, Cody did for sure took the third round. And Sang Yadong had a point deducted in the first. And then I thought the first round was pretty close, and then from when I was doing the write up, I just kept popping up and looking at my screen. I thought Cody was he looked to be fairly dominant in the second and third. So I don't know. I would have to go back and watch the bout, but I was surprised. The feeling I got, and also like I'm writing and I'm constantly hearing the commentators, and basically they were just saying like, "Yo, he has to go out there and finish." That's what they were saying. So and then their whole commentary throughout the fight led me to believe that it was Cody Stanman's decision, but it clearly was, and I think that fight was probably more controversial than the Marina Rodriguez Cynthia Calvillo bout. But to give you a super educated opinion, and I would have to go back and watch it and kind of dissect the bout there. But yeah, weird. 2 draws. Honestly, I'm not opposed to seeing more draws in MMA. I think they are needed. I think you can make things messier, but I'm a firm believer of if the round is over and you're wondering who won, just stop right there and call it a draw. I feel like a lot of people are like, and they start dabbling, and then they end up giving one fighter a a 10-9. When look, if you're having trouble figuring it out, it's a 10-10. Because at that point you're just flipping a coin. So I think we need to see more of that, or maybe revamp the scoring system. I don't know, but something to deal with that exact situation, because I feel like that happens often in MMA. All right, moving on. Sir Davos, guessing this guy's a Game of Thrones fan, asks on Twitter, what Bellator fighters do you think could be top 10 contenders if they made the transition to the UFC? So definitely Douglas Lima. I think that guy's a top 5 welterweight in the world for sure. I mean, let's look at the welterweight rankings right now in the UFC. Tyron Woodley, Colby Covington, Jorge Masvidal, Leon Edwards, and Rafael Dos Anjos. I mean, I feel weird always making predictions, especially being in media. I mean, I don't think I should be. They do it all the time in soccer and other sports, but because this is the fight world, some fighters don't, get kind of salty when you pick against them. So I'm not going to make official picks, but I will say favor. So I'd favor, for example, Douglas Lima to be RDA. I'd favor him to do that. Now RDA is very good. He could very well beat Douglas Lima, but if I had to guess, I'd favor him. Leon Edwards gets tricky, but for sure I can see him beating Leon Edwards. Masvidal, ooh, that'd be a good fight. Masvidal Lima. Again, could go either way. Very competitive. And then against Woodley and Covington and Usman, that's when it gets interesting because we've seen him have trouble with wrestlers, but that's a very top 3 of the division. So I think easy Lima's a top 5 welterweight in the UFC. Now the question was top 10. So I think the Pitbull brothers would do very well. But definitely a lot more Patricio. Let me look at Patricio's record here. Patricio's legit, especially at 45. I think he's a bit small for lightweight, but he's so good that he can actually get wins. And I mean, he's a champion right now, but I think his optimal weight class is 145. And let's look at the 145-pound division here in the UFC. So you got obviously Max Holloway on top. Then as contenders, you got Volkanovski, Brian Ortega, Jose Aldo, who's not a bantamweight, Zabit Nurmagomedov, and Frank Edgar, who's still a featherweight technically now. Yeah, I think Patricio, for example, Patricio Zabit, that'd be an interesting fight. Patricio Ortega, that'd be interesting. I think Aldo would be interesting. Edgar would be interesting. I think then you start going outside the top 5, and then it's Yair Rodriguez, Chan Sung Young, Renato Moicano, Jeremy Stevens. I think Patricio beats Jeremy Stevens. I think Patricio beats Josh Emmett, who's ranked number 10. So yeah, that'd be Patricio's in there. He's a top 10 UFC fighter in my opinion. Who else comes to mind? Gegard Mousasi would probably be a top 10 middleweight. Probably no, for sure. Top 5, that's when you got to start asking bigger things. Can Gegard Mousasi at this point beat Yoel Romero? I don't think so. Paulo Costa, that'd be interesting, but I don't know. Robert Whitaker, I don't think so. As Rodasanya, I don't think so. But then, Jared Cannonier, I don't know. Darren Till, Jack Hermanson, Kelvin Gastelum. That's outside the top 5. That's when it gets a little easier. But Gegard Mousasi would be another top 10 UFC fighter. Right off the bat, Ryan Bader would be easily a top 10 fighter in both weight classes, both at heavyweight and light heavyweight. Trying to think of who else. I think Lyoto Machida, maybe still a top 10 middleweight, maybe in the UFC. Yeah, I'd say so. Rory still a top 10 middleweight in the UFC. So there are definitely several fighters that I think are definitely top 10 fighters in the UFC, Bellator fighters, of course. So yeah, there's definitely a good. I'm sure if I actually do my homework and look really deep into it, I'll come up with more names. But just out of the top of my head, those are the names that I would see being easily top 10 fighters in the UFC. Thank you, Sir Davos, for asking that. All right. SLC Runner asks, what is one fight at 245 UFC 245 that will surprise us and why? That is a good question. So I have the card pulled up right here. Oof, this card is so good, man. Hmm. There's so many good fights. Hmm. I guess it depends what kind of surprise, right? Moraes versus Aldo, I think is a fight that could surprise many because I think not many people are giving a chance for Jose Aldo to make 135. So if it does happen, it'll surprise people that he's actually in there at 135 pounds. I think Peter Yan versus Faber. Am I? I'm gonna say it. Fuck it. I think that's a fight that could surprise people. I honestly don't think people are giving Uriah Faber that much credit, and I don't know why. I think he's a top level fighter. He might not be the very best, but against Peter Yan, I mean, I like the odds for Yan, but I think Uriah Faber can offer a good amount in this fight. I think he can pose some problems. So I think that would actually be more competitive than what people think. That's my opinion, and I think it probably will, and I think it will surprise people. Yeah. One fight that I really like is a women's bantamweight bout between Ketlin Vieira and Irene Aldana. I think that's a fantastic fight, first of all, on just the matchup itself. Both fighters, Irene Aldana is very exciting to watch. I mean, she is one of the most exciting fighters in women's bantamweight. And Ketlin Vieira, she's very interesting. She hasn't fought in a long ass time. First of all, she's undefeated. The last time she fought, she beat Kat Zingano at UFC 222 back in 2018 of March. So it's been a minute for her. I believe she's dealt with some injuries, but now she's back. And I think if she beats Aldana, she should be getting the next crack at bantamweight. I mean, she should have already, but because of the injury, because of the long layoff, I understand maybe they want her to fight one more time before stepping in the cage against the champion. And I think that's probably the smarter choice. You don't want to be like coming off such a long layoff and go strictly into a title shot. Now, it guarantees you that you're not going to lose it, that you're definitely fighting for the title, but you're probably not fighting in the best conditions. So, just getting back to it. So I think this is a good fight for her. And I also think it's a good fight for Aldana. I don't know if she would get a title shot beating Caitlin. I mean, it's not a crazy idea and it's not a bad argument, but she beat Vanessa Mello, who took the fight on short notice in her last outing in September. And then before that, she had lost to Raquel Pennington. It was a split decision. Aldana told me she had her period around that time, and she's had a lot of complications about weight cutting and a bunch of things, and she was really sick entering that bout. And I believe her. And then before that, she was on a 3-5 win streak. So you never know, but I think there's a lot riding on that matchup, and depending on how it goes. Depending on how it goes, we could very well be staring at the next title challenger at the bantamweight for Amanda Nunes. So I would pick that bout. That's like the most low key, under the radar bout that I'm looking forward to answer your question there. All right, I'm refreshing this. I believe that's it for Twitter. Then I'm gonna hop over to the chat. Well, no, a few people just weighed in, but that's kind of cheating because they literally just asked. But no, fuck it. I'll just quickly answer these. Does Sang Yudong get a title shot at 135 in 2020? No. That is Amir Betis. Nick Diaz Army asks, what the F is going to happen with Woodley? I don't know. What is happening with him? I don't know. He's been on the shelf for a little bit, probably looking for the right opportunity. And yeah, we'll see what happens. But he'll be for sure be fighting a top 5 guy in his comeback. And he's right on the doorstep of a title shot. I mean, he gets one win, he could very well challenge for the belt again, depending on how the division's looking. He might be 2 away. I don't know, but he's definitely like close. Then Nick Mason also throws in there, Gillespie should be at 145. I'd love to see him fight Edgar. I'd love to see Edgar at 135. I was kind of bummed out when Edgar announced that he was going to fight Korean Zombie and replace injured Brian Ortega at UFC Busan. When is that? Like pretty soon. This is the last fight on the 2019 calendar for the UFC, right? December 21st, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, December 21st at 5 a.m. Fun. So yeah, Frankie Edgar fighting Chan Sung Young. Look, you got how many title shots at 145? You came up short. You did your best. You're clearly very talented. It looks for a long time before even he dropped to 45. I believe his coach, Mark Henry, was even saying like this guy can make 135. And look, I've seen Frankie Edgar in person in real life when he was fighting. I actually saw him. The first time I saw him was when he first dropped to featherweight and he fought Jose Aldo. That's the same. That was like UFC 140 something. That's when Alistar Overeem got knocked out by um, Bigfoot Silva. I was in that card. That was the very first UFC card I ever covered in Vegas. At the time, I was working, doing an internship for a Spanish media outlet, and they were strictly focused on MMA, and they flew me out there to cover that event. That was what, UFC 156. Yep, 2013. That was a long time ago. And he's not a big dude. He really isn't. I think 35 he could make 35 and he could be competitive. I wonder how competitive he could be, but that could very well be his optimal weight class. Would it be a little too late because he is 38 years old? He does have a good amount of mileage on him, maybe, but I think he has a more promising future than, for example, a Jose Aldo. I'm actually curious to see Frankie Edgar fight at 135 because I could very well see a scenario where he's actually really good and could very well make a run for the belt, 100%. And then the Sandhagen fight was just amazing. It was just stylistically, it was a good fight. And whoever wins, it's a good story. Sandhagen wins. All right, we got a next contender right there. But so that fight's still on. But Edgar is fighting Korean Zombie right now. Yeah, I don't know why. It makes no sense to me, but he is. We'll see how that fight goes. I really don't think he's going to end up fighting Sandhagen just because the fights are about a month apart. And look, if you fight Korean Zombie, whether you like it or not, whether you win or not, you're likely going to take some damage. I mean, we've seen Zombie get knocked out in like 10 seconds. I believe, like, who put him away? Like George Roop put him away or something like that, like back in the day, but it doesn't happen often. What was the question again? I lost it. But yeah, I kind of went on a little on a little rant there. Oh yeah, that Gillespie should be fighting at 145 and Edgar should be fighting him. No, Edgar should go to 35. I really want to see that, and I think Gillespie's fine at 155. I mean, I spoke to him recently, and I did a couple of write ups for MMA Junkie, and yeah, I don't know. The guy seems to be at a really good space. I mean, he knows what happened. He's clearly aware of the fact that he needs to fix some holes in his game. But I think he's happy with some of the progress he's made, and I think he should be. I mean, in that fight before getting knocked out, he was landing heavy shots. He was landing often. He was landing hard, and that's pretty scary when you're that high level of a wrestler. So we know he can wrestle his ass off, and we also know he packs some power and he's not trigger shy. That can take you pretty far, man. You just got to adjust a couple things in the defense. He mentioned how he needs to keep his hands higher and use more head movement, maybe threaten a little more with the wrestling. But he also explained to me in detail, and that's up on MMA Junkie, why he didn't wrestle Kevin Lee. I mean, Kevin Lee was on a really, really low stance. He came in with a really good game plan. And one of the reasons why Gillespie was throwing so hard was hoping that, Kevin Lee would cover up and stand up in a straighter stance and not be so low for him to be able to shoot for a takedown. But that never happened. Kevin Lee took the shots and kept the stance. So Gillespie just had a hard time taking him down, or just even shooting for a takedown because of that. So I think Gillespie's fine at 155, and I'd love to see him get a top 10 guy. And he also mentioned he wants a rematch with Kevin Lee, but he was pretty honest about it. He's like, look, I know how immediate rematches work. I'm not a champion. I'm not getting one. It wasn't controversial. It was a perfect kick by Kevin Lee. But maybe down the road in a few years, on the road to the title, maybe he's the champ or I'm the champ. Yeah, totally. Like in the future, I'd love to fight him again. And I respect that. And to be honest, I'd love to see a fight again. One, because it was exciting. And two, because I'm really curious to see what would happen if they actually lock up. We did not see that. Yeah, I mean, these are two of the best wrestlers at 155. I'd like to see some wrestling, some crazy scrambles. So Yeah, we didn't get that, but we still got a fun striking battle. But maybe down the line, yeah. And look, Kevin Lee is what, 27, super young. And Gillespie, although he's 32, he fairly recently started his MMA career, so he still has a long road ahead. So I could definitely see that happening in the future, not in the near future, and maybe not 2020, 2021, who knows? But it's not a crazy thought. All right, so that does it for the Twitter questions. If you're sending stuff right now, that's cheating because we're supposed to get these queued up. We're supposed to get these, prior to me going live. But I decided to be a bit generous and answer these right off the bat. So we got 20 minutes left. I like to do this for an hour in case you're new. This is how long usually these things go, an hour and like a couple minutes. So now let's go to the live chat. I have not peeked, so I don't know what's going on. Let's see. You guys can hear me, right? Hello? Yep. Audio's looking good. All right. Let's see here. Going through the live chat right now. All right. Matraxia asks, we're gonna talk about Atletico Madrid. I don't want to, but yeah, Atletico Madrid is going through a rough spot. They recently took a draw against, who was it? Was it Valencia? It was a tough team. Let me pull their record up. Yeah, they're not so hot right now. So, oh no, shit, it was against, even worse. Oh no, yeah, it was against Villarreal, 0-0. Very uneventful match. Atletico Madrid are still struggling to find some sort of offense. Defensively, they're good. They're not as good as they once were. That's why the results, I feel like, are not as good. Because their defense is still great. You got John Olak in the back. You got great center backs. But currently, the best center backs, Jose Maria Jimenez and Stefan Savage, are injured. So now we got Felipe and Mario Hermoso, which they're good, but they're not the first choice. They're not first string. So we're working with that. Also, yeah, the defense is not the same as when Godin was. I think when Godin ran the shot back then, back there, it was the best. It was the best defense that Atletico has ever seen. And then the attack, we're struggling to create chances. I thought, for example, in the Barcelona match, I don't know if you guys saw it. It was last Sunday, actually. They did good, man. They looked good. The first half was really, really good. I thought they were on the verge of scoring like multiple times, but they just couldn't get it done. They got tired. And then Barcelona have a certain gentleman by the name of Leo Messi, and that guy's a magician. He can do whatever he wants at any time. That guy will decide how matches will go. That's how good he is. He just needs to be brilliant for 5 minutes, and he will get shit done. He doesn't need to be good the entire game, and that's what we saw. So it was, I think Atletico deserved the win there. At the very least, a draw. But well played, Messi. Well played. Yeah, we're not looking good, but I mean, we're still in champions. We got Lokomotiv Moscow on Wednesday, and we are second. We do need a win though, but I feel pretty confident that they would beat Lokomotiv Moscow and at least keep advancing in champions. But yeah, my poor Atletico Madrid. What's new? Matraxia says that was first. Dan been getting saucy recently. Not me, but the referee Dan Mergliotta. If you guys don't remember, he also had that incident with Greg Hardy where he was just shaking his head and kind of showing disapproval of his Fortnite dance following one of his wins. The same thing with MVP. So yeah, Mergliotta it hasn't been the best time for him recently. I do think he's a good referee, but what he does outside of actually overseeing the match, like advising Stefan Struve on what he should do, maybe like kind of suggesting like, look, you're up 2 rounds. If you do not continue, it's a no contest, kind of telling him like, it's in your best interest to continue. And then kind of getting involved in look, there shouldn't be any taunting and whatnot and taking a point from MVP and all that. Like, I understand martial arts is about respect, and he probably has a very similar outlook towards that. But at the end of the day, this is prize fighting, and that whole era, it's long gone. So this is the reality that we deal with, and his job's to referee, and that's what he should do, which I think he does good. I think he's a good referee. But yeah, he's had some interesting calls recently. Let's see what else. By the way, if I'm reading the chat right now, so if you're watching now and want to ask something, now it's the time to throw something on the chat. Amir Betis says or asks, "Yo, Danny, does Joshua beat Wilder?" He could. He's very skilled. We saw that in the second Ruiz fight, how he was able to adjust, change his style, trim down his frame. I mean, that performance from Anthony Joshua against Andy Ruiz was clinical. I mean, it was straight from the lab, and I'm not here suggesting any steroid use. I'm just saying straight from the lab, as in it was just meticulously, designed that performance, and he stuck to his game plan. He didn't really stick away from it at any point in time. He really just did what he needed to do to get the win, and it was a flawless performance for the most part. I believe I only saw him lose one round. I think it was the 8th round. Every round besides that one, I scored it for AJ. But yeah, he's looking really good. He's obviously very skilled. He's got power. He can move. He's smart. But Wilder is Wilder. I think really the only man that can beat Wilder at this point, in my opinion, is Tyson Fury. And even him, we know that he can go down with his power. He has to be very, very careful when approaching Wilder. I mean, anyone does. But in my opinion, I think Wilder beats Joshua. He does. I think Joshua might be able to look good early and kind of like a lot of Wilder's fights, to be honest. I think he just might be able to look good early, but he's been rocked before. Andy Ruiz dropped him. I think Wilder has way more power than Ruiz, and he can drop Joshua, and he's fast as hell too. So no, I think Wilder beats Joshua, but I'd like to see that. That'd be a good fight to watch, 100%. Somebody disagrees in the chat. Nurlan Ramasanov asks, do you think because Colby beat Lawler impressively, that is why everybody gives him some chance against Usman? Personally, I think Usman will easily dominate Colby. What are your thoughts? No, I think even prior to that, like I've always been impressed by Colby. I was impressed by Colby before even his crazy streak, before he was even this MAGA character. Like I saw a few fights from him. I think it was even the Dong Young Kim fight where I was like, dude, this guy can be something in a few years. And then he did what he did with his whole MAGA shtick. And, I think that's blinded people into how good he actually is. I think people don't want to give him credit because they hate him so much. And look, you can do whatever you want. And look, I'm not a MAGA guy. I'm not a fan of Trump. My political views definitely don't align with Colby's. And even outside of that, the way he handled something like, talking about, Matt Hughes and the train and certain things he says, I do think they're a little crossing the line for sure. But, it is the fight game. These things happen and almost anything goes, right? For the most part. So what can you do? But you got to put that aside and you just got to look at the fighter. And he's a very good fighter. The guy can wrestle his ass off. He's got submissions. Good striking now. He's developed that. He can strike. He can take a punch. He can move. He's a good athlete. He's got that that porn star cardio, as he likes to call it. The guy really is well conditioned. Yeah, he's a good fighter, and it's a very interesting bout, the Usman one, because Usman it's a little different, but they excel in very similar areas. They're both very strong wrestlers, and I think Usman's a little less mobile, not mobile, but maybe less agile. He's definitely a more dominant presence, a stronger force. So I think in the wrestling department, I think Usman probably beats Colby. But I think Colby might just know enough to I don't know, to cause some interesting scrambles and to keep the feet long enough where I think he's better. And, he will be able to, land some good strikes on Usman. But that's a good fight. I can see it going either way. And, yeah, I think the Colby performance against Lawler, to answer your question, Nurlan, yeah, it opened a lot of eyes. Like, look, this guy's just not just a wrestler. Like, he can strike. And also, he can deal with the media. Like, that's something you guys got to, factor in as well. it's easy to it's not easy, but it's easier to get wins and look good when the pressure's off, when you're the first fight on the card, when you don't got the media asking you stuff, when there's not many expectations on you. But look, he headlined that UFC New York event, which I went to in New Jersey, and he was doing the most media. He was doing a bunch of stuff. He was injured going into that fight, and look how he performed. So in a title fight, I don't think he will shy away from the cameras and let the media affect them. In fact, he's even dialed down. I mean, if you look at if you just Google News him, the amount of headlines he's generated since this fight got booked with Usman is way less than for any of his fights before. I'm sure it'll go up as the fight gets closer here in a week, but yeah, he's dialed down on it, which is a good sign, and it's going to be a fantastic fight. And I think Colby has a really good chance in beating Usman. I think it's close, but I think if I had to favor someone, I would favor Colby, to be honest. He's a good fighter. Even if you don't like him, he's a good fighter. All right, let's see. I think Patricio is the most legit. Daniel Yerk adds to the chat. Yeah, yeah, man. He's very good. He's very very legit. Top 10 for sure in the UFC. Top 5 maybe. Those are the interesting questions. All right, Edwin Campos asks, how do you personally get what is it? How do you personally get around getting caught in beefs in MMA media? I don't know. I mean, I don't even think there's like that many beefs. There's beefs everywhere you go in any industry. I assume. I mean, soccer. You look at anything. Um, I don't know. I'm a pretty chill guy. I get along with everyone. I mean, by nature, I am very tranquilo. I am a very chill dude. So um, even in high school, like I never really beefed with anyone. I mean, if you beef with me, you got to be like a real asshole, because for the most part, like I'm pretty chill, and I'm also like pretty humble. Like I have no issues whatsoever, like admitting I ever did a mistake, or asking, telling someone I'm sorry. Like for me, that's not a issue at all. So, and I'm pretty chill. So like, I don't know. I never get into beef, period. So yeah. And also, I just just try to do the right thing all the time. Not try, don't try to fuck anyone over, and uh, you should be free, Edwin Campos. But yeah, I'm a chill dude. Matraxia says, how'd you get your start in MMA media? I do get this question fairly often. A lot of emails about it too. I don't reply to all because, well, for starters, like I'm a busy guy. If you work in MMA media, you know this. Like MMA media is, by nature, it'll require you to work harder and more than you would covering any other sport. Again, it's not true across the board. I'm sure there are people in other sports that might work more than me and more than others in the industry, but I think an average, um, people that work in MMA media tend to work a decent amount, and that's just because the news cycle is nonstop. For starters, there's no seasons in MMA, so there's no time off. You're working year round. There's no seasons. There's MMA all the time, every weekend. I mean, we just came off before this weekend. We had a 2-week layoff basically from any major MMA events, and that was weird. Like I'm like, oh, I don't have to be home on a Saturday night. Like that's just the nature of the game. So, um, oh, to answer your question, I'm kind of going on a rant here. That wasn't the question. So, how did I get started in MMA media? Um, well, for let's see, I've always been into media. Like I think a lot of people get into MMA media because they were MMA fans and then they just wanted to cover that. So then they start getting into media and hoping to blend the two. For me, it was kind of the opposite, but I've always been into media. Like in high school, I was even not even in high school, like in middle school. Like for example, I remember for like some Christmases and birthdays, like I would always ask for like cameras and stuff like that. And at a very early age, when I was in middle school, I learned Windows Movie Maker. I don't know if you guys remember that. That was like a very early um software for editing videos, and I would always do like little. I used to skateboard and just shoot some skating stuff and with my friends and do little videos and stuff like that. And yeah, I've always been into media. And then in high school I took some TV production classes, took some film, and I was also becoming a big fan of MMA in high school. And I went to school for media, for broadcast media. And yeah, my love for MMA kind of took over a few projects that I did. So like I took a documentary filmmaking class, and I did a documentary on an MMA fighter, a former UFC fighter, Mike Rio. So a lot of my projects would revolve around that. And it was just something I was into. So I started going to local shows. At the time I was living in South Florida, in Fort Lauderdale, like Miami area. And I started covering Fight Time Promotions. I believe they're still around. And for example, I saw a ton of fighters come up. I saw Nico Price come up from basically starting his MMA career. Who else did I see? Billy Quarantello, who literally just fought this weekend, fought at Fight Time Promotions. Who else? I saw Wagner Rocha fight, before he really dove into his jiu-jitsu stuff. That was after UFC. Who else? I mean, there's so many guys I saw, fight there. And yeah, I would cover that. And I had a lot of fun doing that. And I did well at it. And then I got an internship, as I mentioned earlier, with a Spanish media outlet, El Octagono, rest in peace. So it's a great place for me to develop. And yeah, just like one thing led to another. And while I was still in college, I got a part-time job with writing for MMA Fighting. And then that turned eventually into a full-time job. So it kind of just snowballed. But yeah, I just liked the work. I loved media and I loved MMA because I'm passionate about both. And they kind of just merged together. And yeah, now I'm an MMA junkie. And yeah, I love this job. It's awesome. It's sick. Covering MMA is fun, but it's not for everyone. I think a lot of people think it's easier than what it actually is. Like people think like I have a lot of people hit me up like just friends like, oh, do you want to watch the fights and let's drink. And I'm like, I work. And they're like, oh yeah, like you can work at my place or I can come over. And I'm like, no, like you have no idea. Like I'm not in the couch drinking beer just tweeting. Like that's not my job. Like I'm doing stuff. Like that's a work day for me. So so yeah, I think people maybe not, but I do think many people have the wrong idea of what actual work in MMA media is. But yeah, that's basically how I got started. And if you want any advice on, maybe I should make a video about that, a separate video. But if you have any advice on, if you want any advice on how to start in MMA media, I say start local. Look up whatever your local fights are, and they'll be more than happy to get coverage. And that is a great place for you to learn the ropes, sharpen your teeth, and learn how things work. So start local. Go to your local fight promotions. That's my advice. Spike DeVito, and we are getting close here to the hour. We got 2 minutes, so I believe there's only two more questions. So I'll answer those real quickly in the 2 minutes that we got, and then I'll sign off. Um, Spike DeVito asks, Connor, Danny, if Connor loses to Cowboy, is he done as far as marketing? No. Connor's such a huge brand. Like, I think if he loses, let's say he loses the worst possible way, he gets knocked out by a head kick by Cowboy Cerrone in the first round, and before the knockout, he barely got any offense going. I think he's such a big brand. I think he can get another main event slot, and for example, he could easily do the Nate Diaz fight again. That's a freebie right there. And again, it would sell because of the history, and people would tune in because they hate Connor and they want to watch him get his ass whooped by Diaz, and they want to hate on his demise per se. But that guy can easily lose a couple fights and still be a top draw, still be the top draw. I'm sorry. And yeah, for sure. But I don't suspect that. I think Connor, I mean, we've seen, you never know. I mean, look at BJ Penn, but I mean, that took a long time, his decline. But no, I don't expect Connor to be drop off so much that I mean, it's possible, but I don't think he'll drop off so much that he'll go in there and embarrass himself against Cowboy. I really don't think so. I think if he loses, at the very least, he'll be competitive. I mean, we're talking about someone that, in my opinion, a few years ago, just a couple years ago, he was a pound for pound best at the time. I mean, what he did against Eddie Alvarez was magical. Very, very few fighters can pull that off. I mean, that was like literally like watching Anderson Silva in his prime. Like that was the feeling that I got, where you're just like mind blown. Like, is this even real? Like, is this scripted? Like, how can this guy do that? What he did that night was peak Conor McGregor. I think that's when he was at the very best. I haven't seen him be as good since. Clearly not the Khabib fight. I mean, against Mayweather, that's such a weird fight because it's Mayweather as well, a very good boxer. Um, so yeah, no, I don't think he's done if he loses to Cowboy, and I don't expect him to take, even if he does lose, I don't expect him to take such a big loss that it damages his marketing so bad that he's like done with. No, he might be done with just because he's got a shitload of money and he can just be like, peace out, no more concussions. Let me just enjoy the rest of my life. I'm good. I got other ways to make money. I can see that happening. But I don't think he'll be done as far as like people are not willing to see him fight again. That I don't think that's realistic, in my opinion. But who knows? Let's see what else. Got one more and then I'll dip out. Would you say that AJ Ruiz and the 2022 World Cup are great examples of sports washing? So the 2022 World Cup is in Qatar, right? Yeah. There's been a lot of things have come out. Yeah, basically that's what it is. And I mean it's no yeah, it's in Qatar. Yeah, it's no I mean it's nothing new. Sports have been used all the time to ease way, ease things in, as far as like it's a good way to connect people and bridge certain things and kind of put aside and ignore certain other things as well. um yeah, I mean, that's a heavy question, but let me pull up the chat here again. Yeah, I mean, that's just the way it works. But definitely some controversy surrounding that. Yeah, and that's a very complex answer that would require a lot of uh, thought. But yeah, Christopher Graham. Yeah, that's it. That's a great question. All right, so we're wrapping up here. All right, Christopher Graham asks, "Is Edgar the right choice to replace Ortega?" I discussed that. I think it might have been the only choice, but it's certainly not the right one. Edgar should have been fighting at 135, focusing on his bout with Sandhagen, but instead he's got to focus on this now, and then that possibly is putting in jeopardy his fight with Sandhagen. I really don't think it's going to happen, but you never know. I mean, what if Frank Edgar goes in there, gets a first round knockout, and he's good to go and fights Corey Sandhagen? You never know. I mean, we've seen stranger things have happened for sure, but it's certainly, there's not good odds for that. I think put anybody else. I mean, Qatar, Kelvin Qatar was vouching for that fight. He wanted that fight. Fuck it. I mean, I know it's not like a big main event. I know it's not like your Ortega versus Korean Zombie, but F it, do it. I mean, I don't know. Also, that UFC rally card is kind of stacked. So if it loses Sandhagen, Edgar is not the end of the world. It really isn't. All right, so that does it. I'm an hour into this Q&A. This is where I draw the line and I call it quits. So I appreciate you guys tuning in and throwing questions in the chat. It makes this going by way faster if I know I got a bunch of questions and I can just get through them. But yeah, I always enjoy doing this. As I always say, thank you so much for tuning in. Give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications for any future broadcast streams that I do, live streams. And yeah, just remember, I do this on a weekly basis every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern. The time might change every now and then depending on scheduling circumstances, but other than that, it should be fairly standard. Every Sunday, 1 p.m., this YouTube channel. So that's it. And let's see. What do I got in the works? I got some things in the works, but I guess you'll find out soon this week, some stuff that I'm working on. But other than that, yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. Subscribe, tell your friends about it. And that is it. I am out of here. Thanks for tuning in and thanks for dropping in questions. You guys have a good rest of your Sunday. Peace.